Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond the Bar podcast. I am Denisa Tova, your host, and I'm about to dive into another hearty chat with a remarkable legal trailblazer. So, today I have the immense pleasure of chatting with a wonderful family and divorce attorney, Alyssa Rower. She's also founding partner of her own law firm, ROWER LLC. And she is like a breath of fresh air and truly embodies a perfect balance of grace and grit. And her energy definitely spills outside of the courtroom. She's very much involved with Legal Aid Society, the TEAK Fellowship. She's a mom, she's a wife. So there's a lot going on her plate, and I cannot wait to dive deeper and let everyone get to know her better. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you for having me, Denisa.
So, when we were chatting the other day, you mentioned this sort of a whirlwind journey straight from college to law school. Then you worked for a larger firm, eventually forming your own firm. And I remember that there was a part of you that wished for a little pause, like a breather is somewhere in between. What would that have looked like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did go straight from college to law school to doing a federal clerkship to a large firm. And sometimes people will ask me, do you have any regrets about your career path? And for the most part, I really don't. I feel very grateful for my career and I feel fortunate for everything I've done. I would say the only regret, which is a mild regret, is that I didn't have a time between college and law school of having a job that was really just a job and not a career and something that really takes up your whole life. So I had worked in Starbucks my senior year of high school and I absolutely loved it. So if I could do it over again, the only thing I would change is maybe to spend a year being a waitress and in a ski town or a beach town before heading off to law school because there was not really a break in the intensity factor in my path.
Starbucks, wow. And Beach Town, Ski Town. I actually spent about a decade in Colorado, so I can relate. What was it about Starbucks that you enjoyed so much?
Starbucks, so this was back in 97 when I graduated from high school. I grew up in Rockland County, which is, some people consider it upstate. It's really not. It's like an hour north of the city. And 97 was, it was before Starbucks were completely ubiquitous. So there was a Starbucks a few towns over in Bergen County, New Jersey, right close to where I grew up. And I was just so excited about the prospect of it. Starbucks seemed like such a cool place at the time. And I love I like the service industry, which is part of what drew me to this career of interacting with individuals on a intimate, somewhat basis. And so I loved serving people at Starbucks, and I became a zealot about Starbucks. I think before that, my parents were into like Dunkin' Donuts flavored coffee. Nothing wrong with Dunkin' Donuts flavored coffee, but we had to take coffee classes when we worked at Starbucks. And I remember immediately coming home and saying, how could you possibly drink the hazelnut Dunkin' Donut? So I got very into it. And I just thought it was a tremendous amount of fun.
Oh, I love that. I'm feeling it. And I still need my caffeine, but I'm getting the caffeine from your high. Now, you I love it. You courageously moved to starting your own firm. I mean that's a huge deal. And I remember you said that you wanted a firm where everybody was seen. Yeah, and it sort of sounds esoteric, and I think many people are now talking about culture.
Mhm.
Why was that important to you, and how do you keep that culture fueled every day?
So it's hard, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it by any means. I feel like I'm always trying to learn and do better. For me, I love running the business, and I was a psychology major in undergrad, which is really a lot of what we do as divorce attorneys combine psychology with the law. So it's the perfect area of the law for me, but I think also really perfect for running a business is that it's a lot of psychology. How do you build a culture? How do you motivate people? How do you create some place where people want to work? How do you train people? And for me, I really started it culture first, where I was thinking about all of those factors about what do people need. And I think just from reading management books and really common sense, what people want is to feel like they matter, like they are part of something that means something. And not to say that people don't want to be paid well. Of course they do. You need a certain level of compensation, but I think psychological studies have shown that things like positive reinforcement and feeling like you are essential and feeling like you belong and part of a community actually go a much longer way in terms of retention than, let's say, a bonus, which has a very, you feel great when you have it, get it, and then it fades pretty quickly, as opposed to the more long lasting piece of feeling needed, feeling like what you do makes a difference. So that was a guiding principle when I started my firm. I really wanted the people who work with me to feel that regardless of the level. And I didn't want it to feel as hierarchical as some law firms do feel. So again, I'm not I'm not saying that we achieve that on a daily basis, but it's something that I'm thinking about a lot and I really try to put into practice as much as possible.
You know, all credit to you. And you sound to me like someone who is constantly trying to grow and learn. And to me, right, it's not about the journey, or the destination, I should say. It is about the journey. So I'm wondering, is there a place where you could actually arrive at a culture that is perfect? It's really, I think it is in a journey where you are all working together, learning from setbacks and growing together. So I think you're definitely onto something. Um, if if we were to ask your colleagues in your firm to name something quirky about you, what would they say?
Oh gosh, probably a lot of things, but I'm trying to, I mean, I'm pretty open with who I am. I'm a very open person. So I'm also really enthusiastic. My son who's 10, which I took as a compliment, he meant it as a insult, which was like, you're like the opposite of a grumpy mom. You're always just so, it's like you're too much. So maybe they would say I'm overly enthusiastic, overly rah rah, but that's sort of how I've how I've been built in that I do feel a lot of enthusiasm, and that's probably I got made fun of a lot when I was working at Starbucks when I was 18 years old, and I was just so enthusiastic about it. So I tend to really get into my passions and whatever I'm doing. But something quirky, oh, I can't think of anything in particular.
But that's great what you said is, it was probably annoying to your 10-year-old, and it may be annoying to to some people who are sort of like, okay, I'm done, oh, but
Yeah.
she keeps going, she keeps going. No, that's great. But you know what? That tells me that you sort of are trying to foster this sort of a relaxed culture. The fact that you're open, and I think that's important. Um, and now I bet that the journey though was not all smooth sailing. If you could sort of hop into like a time machine and tweak something in a process of building your firm, what do you think that would be?
So probably I was, and not that I would do it differently, but I was really culture first and probably less analytical than I am now in terms of the financial decisions and how we build things. So I would probably try to strike the balance a little bit more between culture, but also more business minded in terms of how you're building something. Because what's hard to do and what I never want to do is you set a policy and then you regress from that, right? And thankfully, it's gotten better each year in terms of financially. I'm really grateful, but I think I wasn't thinking as much about that in the beginning as I probably should have been. And I was really hyper focused on culture and then also client service. So that's something that I think we give, we're super obsessive about giving our clients the best possible experience and being really responsive and on top of everything. So those were really my main focuses, as opposed to I've learned so much more about the actual day in, day out of running the business. So if I could go back, maybe I would learn more about all of those mechanics earlier on in the process than I actually did.
And the nice thing is that you can assemble a team, right? Is that
Yeah.
if your strength is the client customer service focus, and building a culture, and just sort of trying to figure out what bonds people together and how to keep them fueled, if you will, than bringing in somebody aboard who has those strengths. I am a huge believer in delegation, and I
Mm,
ran different businesses in the last 2 decades, and then I learned early on, like, if I am to do it all, it's not going to be pretty. So
yeah.
it's yeah, there's something about delegating those pieces, and having a
Yeah,
great
we just
team.
had a workshop on delegation actually with all the attorneys. And I also am a huge, huge believer in delegation and also giving other people credit when, I've had a tremendous amount of help from family, from colleagues, from Yuki, who built really joined me kind of when I started thinking about the firm 6 months before it began. So delegation is huge, and also being aware of what you do well and what you don't do well, and having enough confidence and security to say, you know what, I'm going to hire somebody who can do this a lot better than I can, and knowing you can't possibly do it all and be good at everything. It's just not possible.
I recall you have a refreshingly optimistic stance on the "can women have it all" debate. Could you talk about how you've managed to craft such a beautiful balance between work and family? What's the magic formula?
So, as with the culture of the firm, I'm certainly not professing to do it perfectly by any means. Like, it's always with everything, it's always a work in progress, right? There's always things with the firm culture that we can be doing better. There's always things with work-life balance that we can be doing better. But I remember reading the Anne Marie Slaughter article about how can women really have it all? And I've been really fortunate that I think a lot of those elements fell into place. So I run my own business, which gives you a lot more autonomy over your schedule, over your life, over your client relationships when you're the one making the decisions. And going back to how I built it culture first, I really wanted a culture where it wasn't, obsession with FaceTime, obsession with being at your desk all of the time. It was more about, we're all adults. We have autonomy. We get the work done. We're there for our clients. But if I'm taking a client call while I'm walking my daughter to her haircut, like, clients doesn't know that, that's fine. And in that way, I can still be present, but also able to be there with my kids. So I have two kids. They're 8 and 10. So they're at a great age right now where they still need us, but they're not yet in adolescence and not yet at a point where they are totally disgusted with us. And I'm not. I can frame my schedule where I can really try to be there for things. I don't always do it perfectly, and client emergencies arise and I can't. So that's kind of number one, running my own business. Number two is that I do have my husband, my partner, who has also a lot of flexibility and is able to do a lot. And I think that makes an enormous difference. My parents live in my building, so my mom is a huge help in terms of all of the things that I would ordinarily be doing and did before she lived with us, which was, making the meals and getting the kids off to school. She can help with that so that I feel like I can have a balanced life where I can do my work, exercise, take care of myself, and spend time with my kids. But again, I'm also like, I don't want to profess to be I've mastered it by any means. So even just this morning, my daughter was saying, "Mom, why are you always checking your email? Like, can you please get off your phone?" So I'm glad she does. I'm glad we have those reminders, because I think we all, even when we think we're present, maybe we're not always present because we are thinking about something else or responding to a client email when it wasn't necessary to respond at that very moment when she was trying to tell me about her nightmare from the night before.
You know what? This is called being imperfectly perfect. To me, it's about humanizing. Again, there's sort of this lens, and through which the general public is looking at the legal profession, and then I think we talk about, when you're dealing with adversaries, with other professionals, seeing each other as human beings is important. So everything you're saying, I know people are experiencing that. I mean, me included. Yes, we can get completely thrown into work, and then there's that fine line, and dealing with family, and how we interact with the world. And I think it's time to normalize it, and it's wonderful that you talk about delegation, you talk about great support system, and because it takes a village to help people who are going through the divorce process, and it's important that you have that support system for yourself. So that's really why we're normalizing all of this. So this is really great that you are sharing part of yourself. And I know it doesn't stop at home. It is, and it doesn't stop at work for you. Could you talk more about the TEAK fellowship and why did you decide to get involved?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. So I also think as I think we all have an obligation to give back. I know that sounds trite, but it is true. And earlier in my career, I had more time to give. And so I became a mentor for TEAK. I'm on the board of the Legal Aid Society. And so I started with being on the junior board. And then I just recently moved up to the senior board of the Legal Aid Society. And so I had more time to be doing pro bono earlier in my career, less money, more time. Now it's the opposite, where thankfully, I feel more secure financially, but the time is what's so precious and so limited. So I do think everybody has like in some way, either to give your time or to give your money if you're doing well financially, to give back. So I probably got involved with TEAK as an amazing organization that helps kids from underprivileged communities to get into good private schools or boarding schools and then college, and really gives them a ton of resources. So I've had an amazing mentee that technically she's no longer my mentee, but we still have a relationship and we still see each other. She's actually graduated from college and she's an investment banker. So that's been really rewarding and wonderful.
That is wonderful. And we will definitely post a link to those organizations along with your bio. And on a final and a very light note, swinging into cooking as one of your interests, let me ask you this, because I don't think there is such a thing as a curveball for you. What's the most obscure food that you've ever tried? And what is a food that you would absolutely not eat?
Oh gosh. Obscure food. So I love food. I'm Italian, half Italian, and I am somebody who totally lives to eat. I would say I'm somebody who like lives to work, lives to eat. I feel very passionately about the things I love. Food is a huge joy on a daily basis. I also really love to cook, but as I said a few minutes ago, I thankfully have a lot of help from that now from my mother, who's an amazing cook and 100% Italian. So but on the weekends, when I do have more time, I still really like to cook. I find it really relaxing. I find it really joyful to go to the farmer's market. In terms of what I would never eat, I'm not that adventurous when it comes to meat. So the idea of eating like any kind of more rare or exotic meat, I'm trying to think of like, organ meat, those kinds of things really doesn't appeal to me. And it's probably more psychological, things with texture.
Mhm.
So I've been trying to get more into, not trying to get, I love like sushi, and I was trying to be more adventurous in terms of trying more raw fish and omakase, but I can't get over uni, mainly because it's of the texture. The texture just really gets me. So probably things that have a little bit of a psychological component that also have maybe a texture that's not great. But what is the I can't really think of something that I've eaten that's been really outlandish because I'm not that adventurous when it comes to food.
That's really great. I mean, adventurous, maybe. So you could eat, I guess, simpler. It's almost like because I look at my eating habits as well, and so it's these days almost it is more of a challenge to allow foods to have their own flavor and really enjoy it and not kill everything with spices and sauces,
Hmm.
as opposed to I would not venture out these days and try anything terribly eclectic. But it's funny that you mentioned that. I lived in China with my mom when I was a teenager for about four
Oh, wow.
years. We were stationed at the embassy, and I remember that they served sea cucumber. And talking about
Oh,
texture and weirdness, that's something that I would never, I would never eat. So, and I didn't even try it, but there was something about it. Yeah, it just did not look appealing.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love, yeah, going to your point of simple foods. I love just like delicious produce or just really cheese, anything that's you don't need to. I think that's one of the principles of Italian cooking, just getting really, really good ingredients and letting the ingredients shine and not having to doctor them up too much. So,
We could take it a step further and just stay here and talk about cooking and lots of other things. I mean, you have been such a joy to have you. And part of it is your terrific energy and enthusiasm and passion. And, and I've spoken actually to people who do work with you and for you, and they love you. And I see why that is, because you are open and genuine. There's authenticity about you. So it's been really truly a pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you for sharing your unique journey, your true inspiration.
Thank you, Denise. I
and
really appreciate
uh,
it to be on.
and thank you everyone for listening and watching our Beyond the Bar podcast. You can find Alyssa's details at her link bio below, and make sure to hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any more upcoming episodes. And until next time, I am Denisa Tova, your Beyond the Bar podcast host.